Okay, go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. At this time, I'd like to reconvene the regular board meeting. Clerk of the board, please call the roll.
Hall.
Here.
Solis.
Present.
Pike.
Here.
Segura.
Here.
Tarantino.
Here.
Aguirre.
Here.
Adamos.
Here.
Thank you. We'll now hold a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance. And I believe many of you know that we lost two incredible South Bay community leaders last week, Ms. Beth Saldana and Mr. Emmanuel Memo Cavada. Ms. Saldana was a union leader with our partners at SCA. I remember her encouragement and support when I decided to run for this board in 2015. And I know she always brought a smile to my face and always have really nice conversations with her. Mr. Cavada, he seemed to be everywhere, documenting through the lens of his camera, the many happenings at Sweetwater and the South Bay as a whole. Mr. Cavada was also a Purple Heart recipient, a very humble man. Our regards and thoughts and prayers are with both families and the loss to the South Bay communities. They help make better every day, so we can keep them in our thoughts and prayers. And did I say that Ms. Saldana was CSEA? So with that, Desiree, would you be all right with leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Definitely.
Okay, go ahead.
Put your right hand over your heart and ready, begin. I pledge allegiance
I pledge allegiance
to the flag
to the flag
of the
of
United
the
States
United
States.
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The board met in closed session preceding this meeting to discuss the following issues. 1, public employee evaluation appointment transfer, Government Code Section 54957. 2, public employee discipline dismissal, release, reclassification, reassignment, resignation, transfer, Government Code Section 54957. Conference with legal counsel, existing litigation, paragraph 1 of subdivision D of Government Code Section 54956.9. 4, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, paragraph 2 of subdivision D of Government Code Section 54956.9. And 5, conference with labor negotiator, Government Code Section 54957.6. The board took the following action. Moved by Tarantino, seconded by Pike, to approve the appointment of Ana Pedrosa as the Director of Human Resources with a vote of Hall yes, Pike yes, Segura yes, Solis yes, Tarantino yes. Moved by Tarantino, seconded by Solis, to approve the appointment of Mary Rose Peralta as interim principal, Otay Ranch High School, with a vote of Hall yes, Pike yes, Segura yes, Solis yes, Tarantino yes. Moved by Tarantino, seconded by Pike, to approve the appointment of Tom Rodrigo as the interim principal, Chula Vista Middle School, with a vote of Hall yes, Pike yes, Segura yes, Solis yes, Tarantino yes. Moved by Segura, seconded by Pike. Consistent with Board Policy 2120, the board took action tonight to appoint Dr. Moises Aguirre as the interim superintendent subject to successful negotiation of an interim superintendent agreement to be approved at the upcoming public meeting. By this vote, the board has also authorized President Segura to lead the negotiations for the interim superintendent agreement. Dr. Aguirre shall continue as acting superintendent until further action is taken by the board on the agreement. With a vote of Hall yes, Pike yes, Segura yes, Solis abstain, Tarantino yes. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda for the October 12th, 2020 regular board meeting. Do I have a motion?
I will make that motion.
Second, Solis.
Moved in second. Thank you. Vote, please.
Adamos.
Yes.
Hall.
Yes.
Solis.
Yes.
Pike.
Yes.
Segura.
Yes.
Tarantino.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. We'll now provide an opportunity for the San Diego County Office of Ed Representative Dr. Mark Scabarna to make any comments.
I'd like to remind the board, if I could, and I know that the extensive work on the audit is done, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I still have major concerns about the current financial system we have. So I just want to stay on top of it. I want to keep it on the front of the page. I just want to remind everybody that we're going to be unrelenting on following through to make sure that gets implemented so we can close another door on something that I believe we really need to tighten up on. And I know that I have the full support of the Business Services Division on that, but just something that I need to keep reminding to the board because that's a real big hole in our day-to-day operations. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Scabarna. We'll now have an update from our acting superintendent.
Actually, I'm sorry, Mr. Segura. We had public comments submitted for Mr. Scabarna's report. If I could read those at this time.
Please do.
These are from Kathleen Cheers. Good evening, Mr. Scabarna. I respectfully ask you to listen to my closed session comments regarding the naming of the superintendent. Again, respectfully and with full knowledge of your B1 comments at the last meeting, I am imposing on your agenda item to implore you to ask the County Board of Education to step in and insist on a search for a qualified superintendent. Please do not interpret my comments to insinuate Dr. Aguirre is a bad person. I am speaking on a strictly professional level. I witnessed your offer of a loan to our district on behalf of the County Board of Ed when our deficit was uncovered. Now, with my suspicion, Mr. Segura will attempt to use the deficit and our financial status as an excuse to not go forward with the search. I am concerned Sweetwater will sink even deeper into dysfunction. Who decided this? How long has this plan been in the making? To what end? Our community is at a loss. District personnel of all levels are unnerved. While the parents, district employees, and community would normally depend on our district's union leadership to speak on behalf of those they represent and the best interests of our primary charge, the students, I fear we stand alone on this. Some unions not speaking out of fear, and some possibly because they have collaborated. What message does this vote send to the rank and file? Already, all levels are speaking of their astonishment in being expected to follow the lead of someone who has no training, no tenure, no expertise, no experience in leading one of the largest school districts in the nation. Please consider the welfare of our students, value the hardworking employees of the district by not only insisting on a search, but by helping to subsidize it. There are no further comments.
We will now have an update from Acting Superintendent Dr. Moises Aguirre.
Thank you, President Segura. Good afternoon and buenas tardes, everybody. So this week we have concluded the first quarter and students received their progress reports. We'll be using this information to focus our efforts towards supporting students who are in need of additional supports and to remediate learning loss. Additionally, we have begun providing in-person IEP assessments at a number of our school sites. Special thanks to our psychologists, our school psychologists, for their planning efforts to return to in-person assessments of student needs. These are occurring on a one-on-one basis. This evening, I am excited to have our Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning, Dr. Ana Maria Alvarez, along with our Assistant Superintendent of Culture, Equity, and Student Services, Dr. Joe Fulcher, and our Chief Compliance Officer, Dr. Vernon Moore, present an update on the implementation of ethnic studies into our district-wide curriculum. Also, I want to recognize the hard work by our school site staff and help desk to engage students who are having trouble connecting. I can specifically point out to the work that is going on at schools like Bonita Vista High School, where staff constantly responds to calls to troubleshoot devices and connectivity issues. Thank you to our Information Technology Department led by Mr. David de la Calzada and all of the site network technicians for the incredible work you are doing to keep our staff and students connected during this period of distance learning. With regards to reopening of our campuses, I need to acknowledge that there are various viewpoints in our community regarding the safety of opening of our schools for athletics to community groups. As indicated in September, our campuses are currently closed. However, we do continue to monitor COVID-19 case rates in our communities, and if we reach a point of stability, there's certainly a possibility of a phased opening of our schools for purposes of athletic training and conditioning. As a reminder, the California Department of Public Health is still not allowing any athletic competition, so any type of facility access must comply with the existing health orders. To our teachers and staff, I hope you have had a restful week and had a time to recharge your batteries and are ready to return invigorated to continue supporting students through the distance learning process for the remainder of the semester. Our team continues to work with our parents, community, and staff to provide individualized and small group supports to our students having trouble accessing distance learning, and to our student athletes who are looking for ways to begin a process for conditioning in a safe manner that protects our students, staff, and community. This work is ongoing. In closing, while these last few months have been incredibly challenging for all of us, I continue to appreciate your support and patience as we work through situations that are new and unique to all of us. Thank you to Team Sweetwater.
Thank you, Dr. Aguirre. Now we will have a report from our student board representative, Desiree Adamos.
Thank you, President Segura. I hope that everyone had a restful fall break. And before I continue on with my report, I would like to acknowledge that today is Indigenous Peoples Day, and to honor the Indigenous community of San Diego, I would like to remind everyone that we are on Kumeyaay land. And second of all, I would like to thank Mr. Mercado for scheduling a meeting with me to discuss in depth what restorative justice means to our students and further action plans on how we can continue to implement restorative justice within our classrooms. I would like to thank the school student representatives with ethnic studies, especially the one at Southwest High School, Metzli Carbajal, for creating a petition to find students within their district that would be interested in taking ethnic studies and sending that data to their administrators. I have attended a student board member symposium on Saturday that was led by the California Association of Student Councils, where I got to speak to other student board members from across the state, and we got to bounce ideas off of each other on how we can improve and change education policy within our district. I would also like to thank Mr. Hisu for his continuous support and open conversation about LGBTQ+ representation in our district and action plans on how we can make these students feel represented. And then I would also like to thank Mr. Moore for working on resources for students who have dealt with sexual assault, and the peer mediation teachers at our school sites that have vocalized supports for implementing student-led support groups modeled after Bonita High School peer mediation support group. That is all. Thank you.
Thank you for that fine report. I really appreciate that. This is a point on the agenda where members of the public may address the board on any matter not on the agenda and have 3 minutes each to do so. The Board of Trustees cannot legally take action on or respond to matters not posted on the public agenda, but will refer the matters to the superintendent's office for review and report. Speakers' comments shall refrain from using profanity and shall be presented in a respectful manner. Thank you for your cooperation.
Yes, I have 11 submitted comments. The first comments are from Angeli Rotuya. Miss Mary Rose Peralta was my high school Tagalog class teacher for 3 years in a row. I have nothing but the fondest memories of her as a teacher during those formative years. She had such a positive impact on me, not only as a strong Filipino role model in the community, but also just being a source of positivity for me on a daily basis. She would light up the room with her infectious smile and attitude, always willing to help us students in any way possible academically. The fact that I chose to continue being in her class for 3 years in a row to learn the Filipino language speaks volumes. She was supportive of all her students and provided a positive environment in her classroom always. Mrs. Peralta was very much embraced and loved by her students, and I am glad to have been a part of her classroom for 3 years during my time at Montgomery High School. She was definitely a great teacher and mentor for myself and so many others I went to high school with. The next comments are from Ashley Dahlstrom. Dear board members and Sweetwater reopening team, the best thing Sweetwater did this calendar year was release a substantial reopening plan for schools based on checkpoints, local data, and science. There is already speculation about the November 30th checkpoint, and the president has already determined the numbers will make our January decision. As a teacher who has spent my career in West Side schools, I'm sickened and appalled at the uncouthness some East Side families felt entitled to share in public comment at the previous board meeting. My current school site is filled with students experience all levels of grief while still attending their classes and working with our staff to find success in a global pandemic. I've had to, on multiple occasions, adjust curriculum for students that missed weeks of instruction recovering from COVID or the trauma of their family member experiencing COVID. The short-sighted nature of parents begging for athletics and extracurricular access that their student is, quote, entitled to, truly exposed the vast and diverse population Sweetwater serves, especially the socioeconomic regions of the district boundaries. Yes, Grossmont District has allowed some in-person instruction because those numbers are low enough to be considered safe for those zip codes. And yes, Lakeside District and some North County schools have allowed in-person hybrid learning. The COVID numbers of those communities are that determination. I applaud the board and SCA for sticking to the reopening plans that led our direct via science and critical thinking, not knee-jerk reactions and political theater. This plan is all or nothing. All zip codes are either safe or not. I couldn't imagine the outcry of students west of the 5 could not attend in person due to their zip code's COVID numbers, while schools off the 125 are in session. That is what it means to be inequitable, and that is what Sweetwater and SEA is planning against. So thank you, Sweetwater and SEA, and hopefully November 30th leads to a more hopeful scenario for 2021. The next comments are from Cesar Fernandez. Good evening, board and superintendent. There has been a lot of public advocacy around a return to school sites, mostly from parents and those in the sports community. The opinion from those of us who feel a significant return is not safe is not being heard. No one can deny that the numbers in the South Bay, specifically Chula Vista, are not the same as the rest of the county. The decision by this district to remain in distance learning was not made lightly. It was supported by a presentation that included COVID-19 statistics by zip code that correlated with state and county guidelines. Until the community at large can take measures to lower the rates of COVID in our zip codes, it is still not safe to return in a significant manner. Teachers know that in-person instruction is the best way to connect with and teach students. We miss them. The transition to distance learning has not been easy. Those of us teachers who are parents feel the mounting stress. We look forward to getting back, but only when the statistics and campus conditions deem it safe. Thank you for your time. The next comments are from Christina Espinosa. Good evening, my name is Christina Espinosa, and I am both a teacher at Hilltop High School and a parent to 2 Hilltop Lancers. I am both a proud Sweetwater educator, but also a concerned parent. I have always found myself stuck in the middle between teacher and parent, roles that move back and forth from critic to advocate, and I'm learning to pick my battles. More and more, however, I find myself amongst desperate parents who are searching for answers regarding school reopening and the questionable return of high school sports. We've learned that on-site school will not reopen until 2021, and parents have been dealing with the tremendous impact that has had on their children's lives. We're getting by because we see a vague light at the end of the tunnel. I am blessed to have 2 high school-age children that continue to work hard for their grades as much as they report to really dislike school now and to be losing motivation to log in. I'm no one to question the decision to keep schools online, as I am neither doctor nor scientist. Of course, I believe that we should prioritize the health and safety of our students, their parents, and our staff. I chose to address the board tonight, however, to ask for some transparency in regards to sports. Many of us receive CIF newsletters through email or social media, but nothing from Sweetwater lately. We know that some districts are practicing through AAU, and I see whole basketball teams with coaches working out in various parks around Chula Vista. I'm assuming they're from city schools. My oldest child plays travel ball with girls in different districts, and their parents tell me that they've heard that Sweetwater has no plan to reopen at all. Every resource I've used at the district level says otherwise and assures me that the plan to move forward after winter break still stands. I don't know who to believe. What I think we need is for district leadership to honor the patience that parents are demonstrating with some honesty. Can someone please give us an outline, a plan, anything? I don't want to bore parents with my daughter's softball recruitment story, but if her travel team continues to work out and her high school team doesn't, it makes sense to me to move her to a different district in order to keep her competitive with her peers. She can't just not play. I know it sounds extreme, but many parents are using this type of language. Can you give us some hope or light at the end of the tunnel? Just some communication would be nice, maybe an update. The next comments are from Dania Avalos. I represent many senior parents from Eastlake High School, and we want to consider please that class of 2021 can have their ceremony at their school, at the football field. Less expensive for the district, and we want our seniors at least to know the date to be at the campus. Please consider that and start planning. We are a huge group of parents willing to make it happen. Thank you. The next comments are from Ismina Castellon. Hello, I am very frustrated with the way Chula Vista Elementary School District and Sweetwater are being completely unreasonable by forcing our kids to distance learn instead of resuming school normally, being that this age group has virtually zero risk of serious illness and rarely transmit the virus. The seasonal flu is more deadly to kids and young adults, most of your teachers' age group, by the way, as well as more contagious from kids to adults, and nothing like this has ever been done. If this is your reasoning that you need to shut down your schools every year from November to April during each flu season, it's absurd that the California teachers' unions claim to be doing this for the safety of our kids when real scientific cats is showing us the complete opposite. The union should be ashamed for what the great disservice that they are doing to our kids and instead should be fighting back the governor's absurd mandates. But as we all know, there is a marriage between the governor and public unions. Sadly, our kids are being really damaged academically and socially by this prolonged and absurd shutdown of our schools. Depression, anxiety, teen suicide will be on the rise as a result of this nonsense. It's shameful that you are making the remedy so much worse and deadly than the disease itself. Almost every other state in our county has their schools open with options. Not to mention the private schools, which have opened for in-class learning since September here in San Diego. It's a shame that you put bureaucratic teachers' unions' interests ahead of our kids. We are the ones who pay all of your salaries through our high state taxes, and it's a shame what you are inflicting upon our kids by forcing this online learning, proven to be an utter failure academically, not to mention socially and mentally, all in the name of a virus by fear-mongering persistently, a virus which has virtually zero death rate among 0 to 19-year-olds. It makes absolutely no common sense, and it's actually going against worldwide scientific evidence to keep our kids in this prolonged, harmful distance learning. Furthermore, even when you finally decide to open our schools, you will implement ridiculous and totally unnecessary restrictions, and our kids will have to endure them, even if they make absolutely no sense. It's a shame. Please do the right thing already and open our schools for in-class instruction. You cannot allow this to continue. Push back against the governor, fight for us, fidget for our kids as you should, and open up our schools. We know so much more about this virus that our kids are not affected by this, and if there are parents who have kids with very serious risks, then they have the option of online instruction. But don't make the vast majority of our kids continue in this detrimental path when it's not reasonable nor necessary. The next comments are from James Pelicane. As good a job as the administrators and teachers have been doing, truth be told, education is inferior to live in-person instruction. Is it possible to invite students back on campus after Thanksgiving and make accommodation for those who are more vulnerable of COVID through distance learning? Respectfully, James. The next comments are from Kathleen Cheers. Good evening, all. In reviewing this agenda item, it lacks clarity. Currently, you already have the option to limit public comment to 20 minutes on a particular agenda item, as do you have the right to pull certain items forward. So I asked myself, what is the purpose of this caveat? The wording is new this month. Surely you do not intend on moving public comment to the end of our board meetings. Yes, as we, the taxpaying public, pay for public education via our taxes. Yes, the last board meeting's public comment went long. These are unusual times. Parents are struggling with the realities of COVID and the negative effect it is having on their children. Do not add insult to injury by exasperating their struggles by way of any change to our public comment bylaws. You often speak of the importance of parental community input. Now act accordingly. COVID has alleviated your traveling to board members. It has alleviated you visiting schools. Currently, there are no football games where you're introduced and wave to the crowds. My point, if you are adhering to COVID guidelines as it relates to Sweetwater business, is it too much to ask to listen to the voices of your taxpaying constituents, even if they go long? There was a time prior to your tenure where meetings were once a month. Perhaps if it is too imposing on your time, you might consider returning to monthly versus bi-monthly meetings. Those times saw board meetings lasting 6 hours, maybe more. You trustees were the ones who limited the duration and voted for a 10 p.m. closure. Now it appears even that is too much of an interference on personal or careers time. Mr. Segura, you have referenced you have to be up early due to your new status as an electrician versus manager of the IBEW. As board president, it appears you and interim superintendent Aguirre decided on including this caveat. Respectfully, I urge you and interim Aguirre to allow our community's voices to continue to be heard at the beginning of the meeting, since it is a rarity the comments go long. Government is supposed to be by the people and for the people. We, the community, are the people. The next comments are from Kimberly Dixon. Dear Sweetwater board members and Superintendent Aguirre, we would like to remind you that the decision to keep our schools closed rejects the science we know about COVID-19, ignores the advice of medical experts, and disproportionately harms our most vulnerable population. Parents want a choice to return to in-person education. As physicians in the community, we see firsthand the increases in depression, suicidal ideation, anxiety, pregnancy, and sexually transmitted infections in teens and overdose. We recognize that returning to campus may not be the choice for all families or teachers due to their own risk factors. This is not a one-size-fits-all approach. We encourage you to offer options. Schools and teachers are essential. We encourage you to look at the science and the risk versus benefits of in-person instruction. Is the board keeping our facilities and schools closed under the veil of COVID to make up for the budget crisis? Or was the district simply not prepared despite many months they have had to make arrangements? We ask that the board is transparent and remind you that this is the same board that led our district into our budget crisis. We remind you that you are elected by our community to represent our needs. Your surveys showed that 2/3 of families wanted to be back on campus for in-person education in some capacity. Instead of saying no, we cannot open, we suggest you begin to say how can we give our families options. Give families a choice to return to campus. The next comments are from Kristen Sinclair. Brian and Kristen Sinclair. We are concerned parents of a Sweetwater Union High School District middle schooler. We want to acknowledge that our home school, Eastlake Middle School, has been working exceptionally hard during this time of distance learning. We have been impressed with the communication, organization, and care of the staff working with our 7th grader. While it hasn't been seamless, she is tech savvy, and we recognize that she has learned invaluable lessons in flexibility and tenacity. Both of our jobs have allowed us to spend the necessary time at home to supervise and assist as needed. After listening to the stories of other families, we know that we are in the minority. We feel compelled to speak for those from whom you will not hear, our neighbors with special needs, students, and others who are single parents or dual parents working hard to put food on the table. These parents do not have the luxury of time to keep up with all district communication and analyze presented data. We watched the Sweetwater COVID-19 situation update presentation on September 21st and sent an email with our concerns about the reopening plan to the school board and cabinet members. Unfortunately, we did not receive a reply. We hope that this public letter will help others understand our concerns with the reopening plan and encourage the cabinet and board members to reply. In the September presentation, California Department of Public Health metrics regarding weekly case rates were applied to Sweetwater zip codes. While said zip codes do have a higher case rate than other parts of the county, the board should understand that applying Department of Health case rate metrics to smaller populations delineated by zip codes is not germane and establishes physically impossible criteria that cannot be achieved. If the district continues to apply these ill-suited metrics, entering phase 2 is highly improbable by the next review date of November 30th. Current trends suggest that the district will not exit the Department of Public Health purple tier even for the 2021-22 school year. We would like to present the case numbers behind these metrics. In order for Sweetwater to move to the next phase, our entire district can only have 27 positive cases per week to be considered substantial and move out of the Department of Public Health purple tier. 27 cases is 0.006% of the district's population. San Ysidro can only have 1 case per week in the entire zip code to be considered substantial and move out of purple tier. This equates to 0.003% of the population. We ask that the Sweetwater District decision makers do not apply these unattainable and sometimes physically impossible Department of Public Health metrics to individual zip codes or to our district, but leave said metrics for the counties as they were designed. San Diego County is currently in the red tier, 2nd tier. There is still a deep digital divide and many students with a lack of at-home support, but you have the ability to abide by your mission and serve those students with a plan to move into the next phase and bring back prioritized groups of students to on-campus learning. San Diego Unified recently announced its commitment to bring back vulnerable student groups on campus beginning October 13th with hopes of proceeding to the next phase in November. We implore you to abide by Sweetwater belief statements by valuing our voice in your decision-making and promoting a culture of trust based on integrity and transparency by presenting practical, attainable goals to your constituents. A cursory glance at the data presented in September gives the impression that it is absolutely unsafe to proceed into phase 2, but schools are safely opening around the county, and we are asking for a better plan to safely reach struggling families. California's Health and Human Services Secretary, Dr. Mark Galley, was quoted last Tuesday. We have not seen a connection between increased transmission and schools reopening for in-person learning. Our 7th grader will not be on campus for the next phase, but we pray that you will reach a segment of your students that are currently being left behind. Meanwhile, we will continue to be patient and do our part to fight the spread of COVID-19, as well as fighting for the rights of the students of Sweetwater. The next comments are from Maddie Adotto. Well, I am not going to start with niceties this evening. I am going to get into the crux of things. How many of you have forgotten the past and the promises you made to the students, employees, and community of being transparent and honest? Does the Sweetwater way just become a part of your existence? Is it now part of your DNA? Is doing things the wrong way and the corrupt way now a part of each of your persona? How dare you put an agenda item on a closed session item to appoint a new superintendent without doing a search for a qualified candidate? Although Dr. Aguirre has many qualifications, being superintendent for this district is not one of them. I am appalled that you would go against everything all of you tend to preach so loudly, such as we do everything for the kids, we are doing everything for our staff. All of this are lies. Your tenure and legacy as board members completely sucks, and this is just the nail in the coffin. None of you ask probing questions, and wanting to truly understand an issue is bad enough, but this is blatant. I give a rat's. Not one of you investigate any issues and want to make this district a better place. What happened to your LCAP Goal 3, foster and honor parent, guardian, and community engagement to support excellence in each student's success? Where is the excellence in hiring someone that is not qualified for the position? LCAP Goal 4, develop coherent and transparent systems for operational excellence to support each student's success. Where is the transparency with hiring from within? Why did the district spend so much money on these LCAP goals if they were going to be ignored? Is this just because all of you have the power to do whatever you want? In 2015, we did a superintendent search that cost the district $37,944. Why are we not doing this again? Why are you offering the job so quickly to Dr. Aguirre? Don't you think that the staff, students, and community deserve a better opportunity to see what is out there? Don't you think interviewing candidates to see if someone else is more qualified to get us out of the financial mess that all of you are responsible for would be beneficial to our community? Don't you think after all of the bad decisions you have made as a board member by not listening to the public, we deserve better? I thought none of you could really go to this level of deceit and utter nepotism. However, again, my worst fears are true. All of you are liars, cheats, and doing what is best for you and not the students. Mr. Solis, I hope you are recusing yourself from the vote, and I hope Mr. Pike and Mr. Tarantino will do the right and honest thing. There are no further comments.
Thank you for that. Clerk of the board, will you please read the items being pulled from the consent agenda after you catch your breath?
Yes, the following items have been pulled. Item F3 has been pulled by staff. Item F5 has been pulled by Mrs. Hall. Item G1 has been pulled by Mr. Segura, Mr. Tarantino, the public, and staff. Item G3 has been pulled by Mr. Tarantino. Item L1 has been pulled by Mrs. Hall. Item L2 has been pulled by Mr. Segura. Item M1 has been pulled by Mrs. Hall. Item N1 has been pulled by Mrs. Hall. And item O1, O2, and O3 have all been withdrawn by staff.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion.
I will second.
Moved and seconded. Vote, please.
Adamos,
Yes.
Hall,
Yes.
Solis,
Yes.
Pike,
Yes.
Segura,
Yes.
Tarantino.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. So with that, we'll move to F3, report on request for information, policy direction to staff, and board communications. Anybody want to go first? How about Mr. Solis? Do you have anything? Are you?
No comments today. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Oh, Mr. Tarantino, I'm sorry, you have your hand up, sir.
That's okay. Thank you. A couple of things. First of all, as we move towards looking at second semester on November 30th, I'm getting a lot of correspondence from parents regarding college tests, like the SAT and the PSAT. So I was wondering, as we move forward to open up the campus on a limited basis, especially if we're going to deal with athletics starting on December 12th, that we also factor in the possibility of offering these the SAT test and probably the ACT on campuses as well. And I didn't look up the ACT test, but the next, for the 2021 school year, the first SAT test would be on March 13th with a registration deadline as February 12th. The next one is May 8th with a registration deadline of April 8th. And the final one would be for June 5th. And the deadline is May 6th. Also, there is an opportunity for juniors to take the PSAT on January 26th. And again, if it's safe to open up on a limited basis, that all I'm asking is that we take into consideration the fact that even though California colleges are not probably going to be using those college tests, there are a lot of our students who go out of district, out of state, and some of those schools, and particularly private schools, they do offer or they do require those two tests, the SAT and the ACT. So that's my first request. The second request is that, and Mrs. Cheers hit on this, maybe now at this particular point in time with a new board member joining us in December, it may be an opportunity for us to revisit the amount of meetings we have each month. And again, my preference would be to include the new board member, whomever that is. So that would be not until December when they're seated. But I don't know exactly what the timeline is that's needed in order to form a calendar with one meeting a month versus 2 meetings a month. Anyway, just something to think about and bring back to the board for a discussion item. Again, in a perfect world, I'd like the new board member to weigh in on that. But again, I don't know what the constraints are in terms of timing and stuff like that. Those are my two requests, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hall, did you have any items you wanted to chat about?
Oh, yes. I thank you, President Segura. I did want to say I thank our student board member, Desiree Adamos, for mentioning that we do live on Kumeyaay land. But I also wanted to say that I'm grateful that we have recognized as our district Indigenous Peoples Day. I think it's very important that we recognize that a couple of months ago, we passed a resolution for the Filipino American History Day in recognition of that. And I got an email from one of our teachers regarding that. Using the words heritage instead of history really makes a difference. Because in the history social science framework for California public schools, it supports the recognition of different ethnic groups through incorporating a multicultural perspective in the curriculum. However, I think there's a reason that there's a difference between history and heritage. The term heritage is sometimes used interchangeable with history, but there is a difference. As one of the founding members of the Filipino American History Month, History Society National Chapter, this educator, Raynilla Calderon Magbuhat, wrote us this email. History Month is designated in October. Spanish Explorer, the documentation includes several Luzones, Indios. Luzon is one of the main island groups of the Philippines. Then as a Spanish colony, where Indios, where the term referred to the natives of the island at the time. So there's a big difference between heritage and history, and I think we need to make sure we recognize that. I also wanted to recognize that during the Indigenous Peoples Day and month, I hope that I'd like to read a quote from Crazy Horse. I see a time of 7 generations where all the colors of mankind will gather under the sacred tree of life, and the whole earth will become one circle again. You know, the tribes here in our Native America were really focused not on their own generation, but on the future generations and how they comported themselves, how they treated the earth, and how they treated each other. And that quote really speaks to where we are in this time and age in America. I think that we need to really honor those aspects of the indigenous peoples where we have taken their lands, and I hope that we continue to honor them, not just during the day, but also through the month and through the years as we move ahead, so that the generations who follow us will really have something wonderful to inherit and not rags, you know, like the earth is wearing out. So I hope that we continue in the path of really teaching our children how to treat each other right. So I wanted to say thank you for that. And that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Hall. Any other board member have a comment to make under the only comment I had, Dr. Getty and the board was, I was trying to see if we had any kind of, I know we're not generating much trash at the district office, right, or at the school sites, but if we had any kind of recycling program or any kind of trash program, something of that nature, where you know, where we're just not all thrown in the trash. Just kind of wanted to know if we have any program like that set. And that's all I have. And with that, we'll move to F5. That was pulled by Ms. Hall, correct?
Yes.
Yes, this is a consultant agreement called Embrace Your Home LLC, and it is brought from Sweetwater High principal. And I was wondering, because this really goes to how the parents are able to deal with their children, in especially and caregivers, for parents and caregivers, and it has to do with communication at home and strengthening the bonds between the caregiver and the child. I was hoping that we could open this up to other schools if it wasn't strictly for a particular designated, like, specific group of parents. Then I think it would really be wonderful if we could expand it to include other schools and their parents as well. Thank you.
If I may, President Segura,
Yes.
can I ask Dr. Ana Maria Alvarez to address that question? Ana Maria?
Good evening, Dr. Aguirre, board members. We can certainly work with the consultant and the school site to see if it is open. If it's not, however, we can work with other school sites to offer the program and see if they would like to also participate.
Thank you. I just think that to optimize our ability to do things digitally at a cost savings, I know that in some schools, there are few parents often that show up to meetings. So if we can expand it to include as many parents as possible, across our sites, it would be really great. Even if we have to add additional meetings, I get that. But to allow kind of when people could attend according to their own calendar, whether it be at Sweetwater High or at District Offered, I think it's important because it sounds like it's going to be a pretty good engagement for parents and students as well. So I thank you for offering to look into that.
Thank you.
So any other comments, questions from the board? If not, I'll entertain a motion for F5.
So moved. Solis.
I'll second.
Move to approve by Mr. Solis, seconded by Mr. Tarantino. Vote, please.
Adamos,
Yes.
Hall,
Yes.
Solis,
Yes.
Pike,
Yes.
Segura,
Yes.
Tarantino.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
We move to G1. I believe we have a presentation.
We do. So I want to acknowledge the work that has been happening in this area. It's been a collaboration with Dr. Alvarez, Dr. Fulcher, and Dr. Moore. It's been something that we have been building, and it's a process of building a foundation so that we can continue to add over time. So we're very excited to have this presentation. And with that, I'll hand it over to Ana Maria.
Just give me one moment so I can share presentation. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, thank you. Well, good evening, Board President Segura, board members, Dr. Aguirre, cabinet members, district staff, parents, students, and community members. This evening, our team will be presenting an overview of our plan to develop ethnic studies across the district. We want to ensure that we're able to provide a district-wide plan for implementation. In addition, we also want to provide subsequent electives. Our intent is to outline the collective work that has occurred over the last 5 years to address educational equity in our district and the incorporation of ethnic studies in our program. Our initial advisory team, the district advisory team, includes myself, Dr. Fulcher from Equity, Culture, and Student Supports, Ms. Maria Esther Lizarraga from Curriculum and Instruction, the Executive Director, Dr. Vernon Moore, our Chief Compliance Officer, Dr. Daniel Winters, Director of Research and Evaluation. As a work group, we will be forming two types of work groups. One is a formation of a curriculum development work group, and then the second one is an advisory committee. I'm going to have Dr. Moore talk a little bit about the community support and the formation of the advisory committee.
Thank you, Dr. Alvarez. The community support in our advisory committees is a very important aspect of this ethnic studies work. Currently, we've been engaging specifically with two community groups, and in both cases, those community groups have had dialogue with Dr. Geary, Dr. Fulcher, myself, and other and board members. One group is our Black Minds Matter group that Dr. Geary and myself held a forum with, as well as held a meeting with students that gave us some ideas and indicated, of course, that ethnic studies would be something that they would be very interested in ensuring is available to them. And similarly, our Filipino group, we've held 2 town hall meetings with that group, as well as some other meetings. And again, very similarly, they're looking at the ethnic studies course as a mechanism by which their voices and their culture and heritage can be studied and heard. And that's really what gets to the heart of ethnic studies, is ensuring that the cultures that reflect the diversity of this district are cultures that we study. Thank you, Dr. Alvarez.
Thank you. So as I mentioned earlier, since 2015, our district has really been focused on educational equity. A comprehensive educational equity plan was developed and approved by the board. And the essential components of this really looked at providing the services and the supports for students to succeed academically and also personally. Central to this plan was the inclusion of 5 main elements. That included that we address the fairness, the access, opportunity, inclusion, and outcomes for our students. In alignment with this, 3 years ago, we developed the essential elements of effective first instruction that highlighted those elements of fairness, access, opportunity, inclusion, and outcomes for our students and for our teachers. And along with that, we also looked at how to provide the staff engagement, staff development, and administrative professional development to ensure that we afforded our students those outcomes. Dr. Moore, would you like to talk a little bit about the equity work?
Sorry, yes, again, thank you. You know, I think what really needs to be communicated here is that ethnic studies is really about our curriculum and our course of study reflecting the multiple points of view that, as I mentioned earlier, that reflect the diversity of our students. And I mentioned 2 groups that we have engaged in, but there's many, many more groups, and the groups are not mutually exclusive. What ethnic studies really gets into and opens the door for is intersectionality. Our students come into our schools, our staff comes into work, bringing multiple identities with them, multiple backgrounds, history, as Trustee Hall said, also heritage, and they bring those with them into the classroom. And the notion of ethnic studies is the notion that the background our students come with, the languages, the heritage, the abilities, orientation, all of these things are important and require study. And so it's an ongoing collaborative effort in effect to ideally give purpose and meaning to the curriculum for our students and create a situation wherein our students can begin to connect with the curriculum they're studying in our schools.
Dr. Fulcher?
All right, thanks, Ana Maria. And as mentioned earlier by Dr. Alvarez, the discussion around the ethnic studies is a continuation of some of the work that began about 5 years ago. She highlighted some of that work earlier. I want to talk a little bit more about some of the foundational points that we think bear mentioning. You know, about 5 years ago, this district did something very few other districts have done across the country. We created a department of 1 initially, then 2 when Dr. Mariana Gomez joined as program manager, and finally a team of 4 when 2 TOLSAs were brought on board about 2 years after the department was created. And now we're back to a department of 1. In the beginning, I started a tour of our schools. It was our equity listening campaign, or equity listening tour, and was later joined by Dr. Gomez to conclude the tour and assist with the analysis. The goal was to identify equity challenges and trends across the district. That was a fairly pivotal time in the history of our district. There were a number of changes that had occurred, including a new board being ushered in, new superintendent and new leadership team. And it's a pivotal time right now in the history of schooling and education in this country. We have witnessed political turmoil, social unrest, school closures, a global pandemic, and we've had some tragic local consequences as a result of the pandemic, as all of us know and have followed. Sweetwater community has been profoundly affected in many ways, and when coupled with our struggles around fiscal solvency, investigation, organizational shifts, governance, it's been a challenging moment for us as we kind of weave our way through some of the issues involving social justice and equity as well. Our very definitions and approaches to education are slowly shifting. We now talk about distance learning, synchronous and asynchronous teaching. We talk about learning continuity, and there are a number of other different terms that we're using more and more. And we have to accept the fact that we cannot teach and support our students in the ways we did. There have been multiple signs of encouragement. For instance, we've witnessed our youth, including district students, one on our board, find their voice and are increasingly demanding to be included in decisions about their education. The potential for positive change remains high, and yet so many continue to long for a return to normalcy. If we're not careful, we could lose this moment and fail to take advantage of this opportunity. So as some would continue pursuing ways to make Sweetwater great again, we must realize that whatever path we take, the need to address equity, culture, race, anti-racism, and their intersection with our youth in schools is inescapable. Equity has been and will continue to be a constant. Ana Maria mentioned the mission earlier. It should also be noted the division was not made in isolation. We had district and community stakeholders involved in creating the final narrative. There were representatives from every association, and we had a number of community members participating in the development as well of the equity plan, the culture and climate plan, and in the professional development that we offered going forward. We understood the importance of the work and put aside any differences we had to focus on a vision that we thought was good for the entire community. I'm still extremely proud of the work accomplished by that group of extraordinary professionals. As mentioned earlier, our work has never been about existing in isolation. This is precisely why you see what you do on this slide. We started off by visiting every school in the district, every school and program, to discuss matters concerning equity with all interested staff. We got additional information from LCAP forums, as well as from surveys, interviews, observations, and anecdotal material as well. We also took advantage of the data that existed in our district and conducted an extensive data review, which took over a month to complete and probably longer. And we mined data from all available sources. We used this data to create district and student profiles, which were aggregated by region and shared with all board members. The profiles chronicled everything from health conditions to suspensions by board member areas. We created an external and internal committee of advisors to guide our work, the Equity Roundtable and the Equity Steering Committee. In addition, we had a Culture and Climate Committee, and the culmination of all these efforts led to the creation of the district's equity plan, as well as the Culture and Climate Plan. Could you turn to the next slide, please? Next slide talks about the themes that developed during the listening tour or the listening campaign. We put the results through a fairly scientific analysis, and 8 critical equity themes surface. Now, it's important to note that we followed the data and did not incorporate any of our personal preferences in this work. The themes are what drove the equity objectives that were to be addressed by our department. Still at that point, a department of 2. The English language learners, CTE, ROP, and the leadership components were addressed by our teaching and learning and our leadership department when Diana Carberry was here. So my department, the equity office, address student services and resources, relationships, identifying student needs, east-west comparisons, and counseling mental health needs. That essentially is the objective that we followed in the plan and the work that we did out of my office for the past 3 years. Next slide. All right. As many of you know, and you've certainly heard a little bit about the equity plan. The equity plan was built as a document that could be used to drive and compel our work. So it was used greatly internally by our team. The focus, you heard about the 5 equity variables. We focused on 2 primarily when the equity plan was being developed. Access and opportunity. We have worked our way through the 4 years. We had to take a pause in year 4 because of COVID, but we're still working and focusing on collective understanding and coherence. If you don't have a copy of the plan, we can certainly make it available. It's one that as I mentioned earlier, we have used as a catalyst and to kind of drive the work that we do. The first year we worked on bringing equity into focus, and that was more about self-reflection, looking into what drives and compels us to do what we do, and how is that affected by the people we work around and with, including our students. The next year was about leading and working toward equity, and it was about leadership and what we could do, not just administrators, but educational leaders throughout our district, and what we could do to continue and move the work forward. There were a number of objectives that were developed. All of those were absolutely met during the year we focused on it. And quite a bit of professional development resulted in some of that work obviously reaching fruition. And then excellence through equity. The plan, as I mentioned earlier, is one in which all of these are detailed precisely. And the team, we had a team of 4 at this point, worked diligently to implement and carry out the components of that plan. We still have some work to do in year 4 around collective understanding and coherence. But I think when we move the needle around the ethnic studies, we can certainly have a little more evidence and support in creating the work around year 4 objectives. And the next slide. Okay.
Sorry, there you
It's
go.
okay. So we had a very detailed plan in place. This slide I've shared with a few people, and it's not exhaustive. It doesn't list everything we've done, but we tried to break our training, professional development, our services into a few areas, ways in which we could either focus on equity, climate and culture, or work around creating and promoting excellence. I'm not going to read these to you, but this is a sampling of some of the work we've done along the way, as well as the different community agencies that we've kind of embraced to help us along this journey. Many of them who have been doing this work for years and years, such as the National Equity Project, the National Conflict Resolution Center, NCRC, and many others One of the fundamental aspects of the plan was that the work would transfer from the district office to the school. So we started that last year. We wanted all schools to have a culture and climate committee. So instead of this voice from above or this voice from the district office sharing dictates about what should be done at the schools would do their own review, look at their own data, and make some decisions about what their equity challenges were. That Culture and Climate Committee existed at, I want to say, about half of our schools. They received some pretty intensive training from the National Equity Project to perform that work. And it's work that I think will absolutely make a difference as we move this type of agenda forward. I believe that's my last slide, and I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Moore.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Dr. Fulcher. And I think what Dr. Fulcher has very nicely set up is that there has been years and years long effort to get us where we are, which is at the threshold of having an ethnic studies program throughout our district. And that's reflected in legislation in our state. And this has also been years and years in the making. Assembly Bill 1460 was finally signed in August, just a couple of months ago. And what it did is it mandated that all of the California State University campuses have to have all of their students as a graduation requirement, take a 3-unit class in Native American Studies, African American Studies, Asian American Studies, or Latino Studies. And so that, again, just recently signed into legislation. It was passed by the Assembly as well as the California Senate, signed by the governor in August. And it will make a graduation requirement for students in the California State University system. A similar legislation was in place for high school, Assembly Bill 331. And that was an assembly bill that would have said that students entering the 9th grade by 2025 would also then be required upon graduation, in this case 2029, to take an ethnic studies course in high school. That bill was vetoed. It wasn't signed by Governor Newsom. And there was citing some specific reasons about making sure that the curriculum in that course was more inclusive to the diversity that's present. And I think that's important because Governor Newsom said very specifically when he did not sign this bill that it wasn't that he was against an ethnic studies curriculum in our high schools, but that he wanted to ensure that all stakeholders had a chance to be inclusive. And I think that's reflective of some of the work we're trying to do as well, is to ensure inclusivity with our stakeholder groups so that it reflects the diversity of our district. Our next slide will be Maria Esther Lizarraga. We'll talk a little bit more about the ethnic studies curriculum that we're working on.
Thank you, Dr. Moore, and good evening. And this leads us to the purpose of ethnic studies. And as stated by Tony Thurman, State Superintendent of Public Instruction, ethnic studies provides a roadmap for students to gain a full understanding of the contributions of people of color and the many ways through history and present day that our country has exploited, marginalized, and oppressed them. This is an opportunity for our district to establish ethnic study curriculum that remains rooted in 4 foundational disciplines: of ethnic studies, African American studies, Asian American studies, Chicano Latino studies, and Native American and Indigenous studies. And we added a fifth one with the LGBTQ studies. Ethnic studies also presents students with an interdisciplinary study of the history of the United States of America through a social justice lens. Students can also experience and participate in an in-depth analysis of self from emotional, psychological, cultural, social, historical, and political content. This will allow our students to foster critical consciousness and that social engagement. Next slide, please.
Sorry, there's a little bit of a delay.
No worries. Currently, the district offers Mexican American Studies, a UC-CSUG elective, and it has been in place for many years in our district. This year, we introduced ethnic studies at Castle Park High School and Southwest High School. We also introduced Filipino American history at Sweetwater High School and Women in American History at Bonita Vista High School. These three courses are designated a G elective credit as well. As another option for our students in the Sweetwater District, students have access to these courses at the college level through our CCAP agreement with Southwestern College. Next slide, please. We historically have been very fortunate to have a strong world geography course that has been offered in our district for about 4 to 5 years now. And it was a collaboration between San Diego State, Dr. Shell, and our Sweetwater Union High School District very own Kelly Leon and Joel Rodriguez, our history social science teachers. And this course was designed to look at the 4 fields that encapsulate the course, looking at human environment geography, which brings together the concerns of physical and human geography. This field focuses on how human societies alter their natural environments. They also looked at human geography and ask where questions about human phenomena such as population, culture, and political systems. For example, how transportation systems affect commute times. The third field, mapping science, asks where, focusing on accurate representations, information through maps. And the fourth field, physical geography, deals with the where when applied to non-human aspects of the world when looking at weather patterns, mountain ranges, and oceans. The World Geography course aligns nicely to our Ethnic Studies course and allows students for choice, and it allows students to see their place in the world and allows students to foster critical consciousness and social engagement within and beyond their local communities. Now I'll turn it to Dr. Alvarez. Thank you.
So as you can see, the work that we have conducted at the district level and at the site level over the past 5 years has not been in isolation. And I think we have a very strong foundation for providing a very cohesive program to address the needs of our students and our community. So what are some of the next steps? We're looking to ensure that we have an advisory committee and an ethnic studies work group. Those will begin in October. We will be soliciting support and interest from community partners, our partners in higher education, groups from our Black Minds Matter, our Latino Advisory Committee, our Filipino Advisory Committee, and other groups that would like to participate. We want to ensure that we are very inclusive in that. Secondary to that, we believe that we also as a district can learn from what other districts and communities are doing. The San Diego County Office of Education is offering a very comprehensive ethnic studies network, and our team will be participating over this next year to ensure that we are aligned with the work across the county and across the state. We talked a little bit about the courses that we currently have, and what we're looking at is a multi-year plan, and that plan starts with the development of an ethnic studies course that will be available across the district for every single high school. The second year, we're looking at modifying our world history curriculum so that it's world history through an ethnic studies lens. And then following that with the third year is the integration of ethnic studies in US history. That way students have the ability to have a survey course and then have college ready curriculum that will be accepted at the universities. In conjunction with looking at expanded offerings in terms of Asian American ethnic studies, Latino Chicano studies, Black African American studies, and others to support this work. Throughout all of these elements, we want to ensure that the instructional materials, the curriculum, and the professional development that we provide provides a culturally responsive curriculum and one that reduces implicit bias. We also believe that professional development for our teachers is essential to ensure that they're ready to teach ethnic studies and these courses in our district. Sorry, there's a little bit of a delay and I'm not sure why. There we go. So the recommendations our district committee is making is that as a team, we review the current ethnic study courses that have been approved and see what elements can be utilized for the creation and implementation of a district-wide ethnic studies course. Many of those courses, those two courses from Southwest and from Castle Park High School were modeled on ethnic studies curriculum that has been adopted at other area and county schools. And so we want to learn from the best practices that are already incorporated into those curriculum that have been developed. As mentioned before, we want to ensure that we seek volunteers and form the advisory committee, that we form the curriculum work group that will write and modify the curriculum. We want to ensure that we have the funding to develop this curriculum and to adopt and implement not only the resources and materials, the adoption of textbooks or supplementary resources, but also be able to provide the training that is needed to ensure that we have a strong, relevant program for our students and community. At this time, we want to thank you for listening to our presentation and would like to have any feedback or questions from the board or the community.
Thank you, Dr. Alvarez. I think before we have any questions from the board, we hear the public. Is there a public comment on this?
We have one speaker to this item. Comments are from Roberto Romero. Superintendent Aguirre, Board President Segura, and the board. I completely support the Ethnic Studies Development Plan. The Equity and Culture Department in the Sweetwater District has done an amazing job over the last 5 years. As described in the accompanying presentation, Dr. Fulcher and his team have thoughtfully built a system that supports the staff and students in learning the skills and mindsets needed to engage in the difficult work of recognizing and responding to inequities in the lives of students. Equity walks, restorative practices, and addressing institutional bias were all building blocks in creating a district that acknowledged their own shortcomings and had the integrity and empathy to work on righting the wrongs. The Sweetwater Equity Plan and the work that accompanied it was a model other districts were emulating. Then, unfortunately, this board, under Acting Superintendent Aguirre, gutted the department. In a time when nationally and worldwide there is a movement to do deep and meaningful work on social justice, this district backs away from their commitment to providing necessary support to the staff and students who are directly dealing with these issues in their lives. And please don't tell us again about the policy you are going to write. What is a teacher who is dealing with racial issues arising among students in their classroom supposed to do with a policy? Read it to the students? I don't think I have heard an activist chant, quote, "We need more policies." As a voting community member, I expect a board and superintendent who understand the importance of these issues to our parents, our staff, our students, and the global community. And if they truly understand, they will respond with actions, not just words. At a minimum, I hope the board will approve this plan, but even better would be to also approve replacing the staff that were transferred out and adding more resources and staff so Dr. Fulcher can continue to expand the excellent work he has been doing. Our community deserves this. There are no further comments?
Thank you. I know it was pulled by me and Mr. Tarantino. Mr. Tarantino, did you want to go first?
Sure, I could go. Thank you all for that excellent presentation. It provided some excellent background as to, the development of the Equity and Culture Department and our focus on, again, trying to ask those challenging questions in terms of all the things that, our ethnic studies program will hopefully address. I'm glad to see that it's going to be a college prep elective because right now with the graduation requirements as they are, I don't know where we would put it if it was a required class. But it sounds like I really was impressed with the next steps in terms of it incorporating some key concepts of ethnic studies within world history, and then U.S. history, and probably even government. It would fit in government as well, because there's recently been a lot of talk about injustice throughout the government in terms of hiring and all that. My question, if we go back to the slide, current status, if I recall, and I'm sorry I don't have a number for that because it wasn't on there. There it is. Okay, so if I remember correctly, last board meeting under public comment, I think it was almost every high school principal who went on record saying, "We want ethnic studies now. We want ethnic studies now." Again, I didn't write down how many principals there were, but there was an awful lot of them. My question is, if you look at the current status, we do have some ethnic type studies programs at various schools. And my question is, if these have already been approved and they receive the CSU UC G elective credit, why are they not implemented on a wider scale throughout the district at other high schools? Why, for example, is introduction to ethnic studies only at two high schools currently? And we heard almost every high school principal saying, "We want ethnic studies now." Well, why aren't they using the ethnic studies that's available at Castle Park and Southwest? Same thing with standalone ethnic study programs dealing with Filipino American history, women in American history. Why are they asking for the stuff, saying, making it seem like there's nothing available in the district, and yet we do have some programs, and why aren't they at every school?
That is a great question, Mr. Tarantino. Good evening. At this time, the way that we submit courses for UC CSU approval is on a site basis. And so, for example, when we develop a course that is new to the district, because of site funding that may be provided to support the course, specific interests at the site, and teachers that may have been trained specifically to support the curriculum. It is submitted for each site. So for example, with the Women in American History, that was a course that was proposed in December of last year. Also, the Filipino American and the two ethnic study courses were proposed by December of last year. They were submitted for individual school use, and it goes up into what's called the UCOP, which is a portal system where the UC CSUs approve our curriculum to meet A through G requirements. And so at this time, we are out of time for approval for courses for this year. But in our cycle of approving courses, we will reopen that up in December. And we have through the summer to resubmit courses where we can do that district-wide. That's why the intent of the ethnic studies implementation district-wide would begin in 21-22.
Thank you, Dr. Alvarez, for that explanation, because I found it kind of strange why we do have these courses that were approved. I didn't know that each site was submitting their own approval requests.
Yeah, so we actually submit them on the behalf of the site.
Correct.
But it is directed by each site.
Right. And it was, if you look at part of Dr. Fulcher's presentation, and I don't have a copy of the slide, but it was all of the programs that we've done. It had 3 columns. That's it. Okay. And I'm looking at restorative practices, and we went on record saying that we were a restorative practice district, and yet the 2 teachers on special assignment that were entrusted with the professional development and all of that stuff, they've been sent back to their sites. In fact, one I think even left. So can we still say that we're a restorative practice district if equity and culture is a department of one? And maybe that's just a rhetorical question, but I have some concerns that we may have to go back and nullify that board resolution if we're not working on it. I think that would be disingenuous to say that we're a restorative practice district if there's nobody working on that. Just, again, a rhetorical question, but it is a concern of mine. And that's all I have. Thank you very much. Excellent presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Tarantino. Student Representative Desiree Adamos, go ahead.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. It really means a lot to me as a person of color and as a student representative of other students of color as well, that this is something that the district is actively working on. And I would also like to thank Mr. Tarantino for bringing up that inquiry, because I also have the same inquiry as well. I actually spoke with one of the educators that were brought down from their special assignment position. And according to the California School Dashboard, the suspension rates have remained stagnant in our district. And a lot of students have come forward to me about the how they feel that suspensions really target them and target their community as well. So I was also wondering on this slide too, on if you could emphasize or maybe elaborate upon how we are still practicing restorative practices within our school site, if it was something that we cut off last year. Another thing that I would also like to address is on the last slide. I think it was the further action steps or like action plans moving forward. For the work group to write the modified curriculum, I would like to ask if you include student voices in this, because I do recognize that a lot of students do not have the resources and they're not really informed to check on the district website for forums. So I think it would be best to establish a student committee that would give their, continuous opinions on writing a modified curriculum for ethnic studies. And in regards to professional development for ethnic studies as well, since it is focused on making educators more culturally sensitive to students and focusing on that aspect, I was wondering if it's possible to have student input on that as well. That is all. Thank you.
Thank you, Student Rep Adamos. Paula Hall. Trustee Hall, go ahead.
Thank you, President Segura. I was thinking you had first in line, but I'll go. I wanted to say thank you for the committee that is developing this curriculum and working through all the different pieces of it. Certainly restorative practices and restorative, the whole restorative program has been a focus. And one of the things I felt was my primary goal as a board member to make sure that we put in place. We started doing that in 2014 when we were elected, and have been moving across all the years to make sure that we were engaging our teachers and our staff, our administrators in doing that work. I think it is the work of the school sites to do that work, because it's the teachers in the classroom and the staff at the school site that have the most impact on making sure that they treat students equitably. As far as how that impacts teachers, teachers also need to have a restorative circle occasionally. But 4 years, 4.5, 5 years we've been here, we've hopefully done the work to make the foundation of the program and the practice of restoration in our district take hold and move forward. And that is my hope, and that is what my expectation was. As I met with our state legislators over the past 5.5 years, I have always brought forward the matter-of-fact conversation that funding for programs like restorative practice is essential, that schools are funded in a way that we can really support all these kinds of programs, because as it is now, we continue to be one of the lowest states in per student funding and for education. So I think it isn't on the school district that they aren't doing everything they can to support this program, but it is a fact of the matter that funding for school district and for K-12 education is sorely lacking to enable us to put this, to continue, the expectation that we have unlimited funds to support program. So I was hopeful that Dr. Fulcher and his team were able to lay the groundwork, and that we can, as a board, support our superintendent in following the expectation that we are a restorative district, and that restorative practice lives within our district and with our expectations. So I want to thank the Dr. Alvarez and her team, and Dr. Moore and Dr. Fulcher for their leadership on this. I would expect that we are engaging some real leaders in our district in the classroom, because I know that we have classroom teachers that are really magnificent in how they've already been doing this ethnic work in their school curriculum, in their classroom curriculum. A couple of them I can think of are Joel Rodriguez at Southwest High and Don Dumas at Bonita Vista High. I know that a lot of the curriculum, and what I would like to see emphasized, is the indigenous and the Latinx and the Afro-American curriculum as much as possible, that we incorporate that at the earliest possible point in our however we can do that. I know that they've already been doing a lot of that work around their own curriculum across different types of curriculum, not just in historical or geography, but we have to put that into every element of our educational experiences for our students, because that's really what will impact and change the trajectory of our society, I think. So I want to thank all of the staff for their work, and I hope that we can implement and learn from those practitioners who are already doing great work in their classrooms, so that we can use their models across our district, and not as an organization. What I think has fractured our district and our ability to provide equity across our district is the fact that it's by site instead of as a district we're leading the effort, but it's up to a school site to do that. That means it's up to a classroom teacher to do that work. And I think what their work should be focused on is educating our students. And the district needs to provide the work of bringing the curriculum to the university system and saying, this is what we're doing and this is what we need for all our schools. So all our students have access to the same rigorous but engaging curriculum that speaks to them, that speaks to their culture, that builds up their own self-esteem and enables them to have a vision of a future that really is forward-thinking and brings everybody together, just like Crazy Horse. I don't know how to pronounce. I won't even try to pronounce his real name, but as he was known as Crazy Horse, that we are building up to the 7th generation of our future generations, a world that we will really know that they can thrive in and flourish. So I want to thank you for all your efforts, and I hope to learn that we are doing everything we can to move forward as a district, as a team, as honoring each other and every aspect of our culture and those and all the peoples in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Hall. Mr. Solis?
Thank you, President Segura. Yes, thank you for those comments. And I wanted to say, I think ethnic studies is very, very important for our children. One thing that I did notice was that it would begin from 10th grade, and teaching middle school for some time. I think getting to our kids a little sooner would maybe be very beneficial. I think it would help with those kids that don't think that college would be for them, or don't think they'll amount to anything. I think it would help those kids in middle school to see that, many different people have contributed to the society, and I think they would see people like them that have contributed positively to this great nation. So I think if we do look at maybe starting in the 7th grade, I know sometimes it takes deeper thinking. So high school and the upper grades would work well, but I think if we do like an intro course or just introductory to ethnic studies in middle school, I think would be very beneficial.
Thank you, Mr. Solis. I'll just add, I really appreciate the, I didn't know, did you want to answer for that from Dr. Alvarez through Dr. Aguirre about possibly starting, or how that would look, or when we could maybe look at that, or maybe what the plan is?
Sure. So the initial plan was to start with high school, and part of that is to capitalize on the courses that have already developed and looking at how do we incorporate them into courses such as the world geography, the U.S. history, potentially the government econ. At the middle school, we face a little bit of an issue because of the tightness of students' schedules in terms of very limited opportunities for electives. And so we need to balance that. What we've been thinking about for middle schools is how do we incorporate more diversity in terms of their English language courses or the either U.S. history or world history that students take, so that we amplify the curriculum to be representative instead of adding a discrete course at the middle school. But that's certainly something that we can discuss with both the advisory committee and the work group. And of course, we'll take input from the board.
Thank you.
Thank you. If I might add, I really appreciate this presentation. I know it's something I've asked for a long time, and I know, you always want, when you ask for something, you hope, not knowing all that goes into it, and there's a lot that goes into this, and that's why it's taken a number of years to get it to where we're at, but I really appreciate the work. Dr. Alvarez, Dr. Aguirre, Dr. Fulcher, and Dr. Moore have put into this, and it's really a really good plan. I'm very excited to see this here. I know Student Rep Damos, that was one of the first things she mentioned in her opening remarks when she came to this board not too long ago. I think that is awesome. I would just say that, I lost my train of thought. I would just say that I know that the AB 331, Medina's, bill did, as Dr. Moore mentioned, didn't pass this year. It was vetoed by the governor. And I hope that, it'll come back again. I think that's important. But as we get ours rolling, I'd really look forward to that. And then that brings up another question. And I know we have, we have the plan, and then we have a plan to bring in other cultural groups. And how would we add, that is my question, Dr. Alvarez, how would we add like another group, a culture in the future, like say the Jewish community or Arab Americans and that sort of, how do we add that? It would be the same way as we add the, go ahead and answer, I want to answer.
Sure, so, I think that's one of the reasons why the last proposal, the bill did not get signed by Governor Newsom. He wanted to ensure that there was representation of all cultural and ethnic groups. And so as we look at the development of the preliminary ethnic studies course, that one I think will touch on each of the ethnic groups and provide literature related to it, supports for each one. As we look at this as potentially, I had put a 3-year timeline for the initial work, but in terms of developing a fully comprehensive curriculum that includes all groups, that will take a little bit longer, just because of the resources, the teachers on special assignments that we have. We would also bring in community support. All of that takes time. So we'll do it methodically, we'll be inclusive, and we will ensure that we have the voice of representatives from each of the groups, the cultural groups, to ensure that they're represented.
That makes sense. Before I go to Representative Adamos, I would just say, when I asked for this, and I could tell you when I went to high school, this wasn't obviously in place, and I went through the Navy, and it never really like what my history was. But after I got out of the service and then went to actually Mesa College for took every Chicano studies class I could there, and I tell you, it really empowered me to become, a leader in the union that I was involved with, IBW, all the way where I had some state, and national appointments, and I really truly believe that, because I learned who I was and where I came from and all the great things that the culture that I come from, from the Olmecs to the Aztecs, and it really empowered me, and I know it'd be very beneficial for our students to, who aren't Mexican American, or to learn about those, or learn about the Filipino and all the other cultures. It just would be a really, really good thing. And once again, I would just like to say I really appreciate this presentation, and we'll go to Student Board Representative Desiree Adamos. Go ahead.
I really appreciate the comments about including all types of cultural groups in the development of the Ethnic Studies program. And I apologize, but I would also like to ask again how you specifically plan to include student groups within this, because I do recognize that there are a lot of ASB presidents and other student reps that are watching this on the live stream right now collectively. And we would all like to know if there is a way that we could sign up to give our input on writing a modified curriculum, or our input on the content of the professional development, or anything like that. And that's all that I have to ask, though. Thank you.
Sure, Desiree, that's a great question. You know, ever since we've been discussing ethnic studies, and certainly it's been a topic at the recent board meetings, we have received emails from students volunteering and wanting to participate. So we know that our student voice, you are going to be the participants, audience, and creators of much of what happens in our society. And so it is crucial that you be part of that. So we will be sending to the site principals an interest list from your sites. Because of the work, you know, size of committees is critical. That's why we've developed an advisory committee and then a work group that writes the curriculum and brings it to the advisory committee for review and input and feedback. And then the work group goes back and tailors based on the feedback, so that there's this feedback loop, you know, adoption, modification, and then we take it back to the advisory committee. So students will be able to participate in that. My team and I will be soliciting that information from your school site.
Thank you, Dr. Alvarez. Mr. Superintendent, again, did you want to add anything to those questions that were brought up, sir?
Yeah, thank you, President Segura. So first and foremost, I want to extend my appreciation to the team that's been working on this. This is very important work, given not just the work itself, but also our social context and the time we're living in. This carries weight, and to ensure that our students see themselves reflected in our curriculum and in every aspect of our district is critical. Secondly, I really appreciate the work forming both the curriculum work group and also the advisory committee. And lastly, I just want to make sure that this is a foundational process that builds. It's not the end of the process. Rather, this is laying a foundation so that we can continue to build upon it. And even though the state didn't ultimately end up passing that, or the governor didn't signing that bill, that only means that we have an opportunity here locally to pursue this on our own terms that reflects our own community. So while we appreciate the efforts at the state, here locally, we will continue to work through to ensure that we're implementing ethnic studies here in our district.
Thank you. Let me just add something before I go to Ms. Hall and Mr. Tarantino.
Yeah.
So in regards to, you know, participation, I think, is there a place where 2 board members can get involved in this? I think that'd be something I'd like to ask. And then with that, we'll go to Mrs. Hall.
Mr. Segura, certainly, I believe as an advisory committee member, that would be the appropriate place.
Okay.
Where we could bring discuss the ideas, the team goes and writes, brings it back to that advisory committee so that you can review, give input, give feedback. We would go back and modify. I think that's an opportune place for our board members to participate. If someone from the board wants to be on the writing of the curriculum, also welcome there.
No, that's not what I was looking for. Will that work, Dr. Yeti, what Dr. Alvarez stated?
Yeah, I think the advisory committee is probably the most appropriate place, because the work group is probably going to be a little bit more in the weeds in terms of the technical pieces of it. But the advisory, from a piece of a perspective of providing input, I think that would make most sense.
Yes, and then Ms. Hall.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that there are a number of publications that are really worthy of time and should be used as a basis for drawing out pieces into a curriculum. I would say this book, An Indigenous People's History of the United States by Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz, is an excellent place to start. And I would recommend every board member spend the time to read it, along with the book stamp, which gives the Afro-American history from really the onset of when they were marginalized as a race. I think those things are really critical and key to really developing a student's full range of knowledge about where historically our planet and our nation is. I think it's important. I would like to prioritize as a board that we address Indigenous and Afro-American above everything right now, because I think they are key elements of our society. They've been really in danger. They have been in physical, mental, and I don't know how to say it more than that, in danger since for centuries now. And I think we really need to prioritize them along with Mexican, Latinx, however you want to name it. That is really key. Those three groups have to be the top priority for us to really interrupt racism in our nation, in our district, and in our country, and really become forward thinking in our and enable our students to think the same way and to appreciate and honor each other in our society. So that's all I have to say. Thank you for letting me again comment.
You're welcome, Ms. Hall. Mr. Tarantino?
Yeah, if possible, I would like to ask Dr. Fulcher in terms of, I agree with what Mrs. Hall said. You know, in a perfect world, I think it's the responsibility of each site to take it upon themselves to offer these kinds of programs. But in reality, if there's no accountability, or where would the accountability be given the current state of equity and culture? And I don't know. Where's the oversight? Where is the accountability? And where does the buck stop?
So Trustee Tarantino, is that for Dr. Fulcher, or is that for
if Dr. Fulcher is willing to answer, or at least provide some insight, you know, from his point of view, where do we get the accountability to ensure that all of these things are going to be happening?
So, you know, it's a very complicated question, and I'll be happy to.
I apologize for that. I apologize for that. I didn't mean for it to be that complicated, Dr. Fulcher.
Yeah, I mentioned before to the board and others that implementing a sound and effective equity program generally takes about 6 or 7 years. So it takes some time, and what we want to see is the entire district be on the same page. So that's part of the reason we started a lot of our training with administrators. We wanted their buy-in. We wanted to talk about what the equity challenges were for that school, for that site. So it became important that those conversations occur and that we have common language. That's part of the reason we implemented the equity walks as early as we did. So we could look at what's happening in classrooms and make some collaborative decisions about what we were seeing. So we want our administrators, we want our teachers, we want everyone on board seeing the same thing, willing to talk about those issues as they come up. With regard to some of the other things you raised earlier, I didn't comment, but I will, since they were questions I think posed by you and our student rep. In terms of restorative practices is as much a philosophy as it is a practice. We want to see total buy-in from the board to the classroom to everyone else that's associated with the district. That's why in many cases you see board members being trained in restorative principles, board members receiving professional development about restorative principles. I was very protective of our RP, our restorative practices program, and I wouldn't allow a school to be called a pilot if certain criteria hadn't been reached. And I would say the same thing about a district. Certain elements have to be addressed, have to be reached before a district, a school, or a classroom could be considered a restorative place. There's just been too much damage done by people operating in a restorative framework who haven't had the necessary training, don't know the proper background information or not, don't have the proper knowledge. And really, when they attempt to implement and it doesn't go well, that's when you hear stories about, oh, this doesn't work. Oh, this isn't great. Well, I do know that it works for some of the kids that we have been talking about. And I do know that it's not based on social exchange, but it's based on equity. It's not if you do this, you get that. It's based on fairness in relationships. This is what you expect to get in a fair relationship, not one that's going to suspend or expel for one reason a certain group of students and not the another group for those same reasons. And Desiree, in response to your question, we use RP to primarily facilitate relationships and relationship building, not necessarily to stem the suspension and expulsion rate. It should. I mean, that's certainly one of the side effects of implementing restorative practices, but it's all about building relationships between students and staff and students and students and staff and staff. We think if relationships are stronger and better and more effective, there's less likely to be any conflicts that could lead to suspensions or expulsions. So I took the liberty to address a few of those things that were raised as well. But Mr. Tarantino, we're all accountable. And again, we're a few years away from making that a part of our system. But I think we're closer than we were 4 or 5 years ago.
Thank you, Dr. Fulcher. I'd like to ask.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask the superintendent to respond to your question as well.
Yeah, so in my mind, we all have an accountability, as Dr. Fulcher mentioned, but at the end of the day, it falls on the superintendent to really, that's where the buck stops. And, you know, as a fan of Harry Truman, the buck stops at the superintendent's desk in a school district. And so I think we all need to have a self-accountability. That's very important. And that's where we can work to infuse that throughout our organization and ensure that understanding flows. And I think there's a good foundation, as Dr. Fulcher mentioned. But ultimately, in terms of accountability, in my perspective and humble opinion, it is the superintendent's job to ensure that there's an accountability across the system. And it starts with it's at the superintendent's desk. So I just wanted to add that. I think it's critical to ensure that there's an understanding there and then throughout the school district as a whole.
Thank you, Dr. Getty. You know, with that, I really enjoyed this conversation tonight. And with that, I'll make a motion to approve the G1, the ethnic study developmental plan for Sweetwater Union High School District 10, 11th, and 12th grades. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Vote, please.
Ramos,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Solis,
Yes.
Pike,
Yes.
Segura,
Yes.
Tarantino.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Outstanding. And with that, I know we only have several other things to go through, but let's take a 10-minute break so everybody can use the facilities. Or actually, say 8:30. Come back at 8:30. Back at 8:30. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, we reconvene and we'll move to G3.
Hold by Mr. Tarantino.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just had a question. How is this going to be delivered in like through what subject area? Is it going to be through CTE courses? Is it going to be through advisory? How are they going to do that to deliver this? I think it's an excellent thing, exposure to career professionals and all of that stuff. But where are they gonna, how are they gonna access it? That's my question.
And I'll ask Ana Maria.
She's not back yet.
You're muted.
If I had $1 for every single time that happened, apologize for that. Thank you, Mr. Tarantino. Great question. So this is the second year that we'll be using NEPRIS, and we'll be using an online platform. Last year, even when we weren't in distance learning, it was an online platform. It is through our college and career technical education program courses, and there are options for every industry sector to provide mentoring, job shadowing, resources for both students and teachers.
That's all I have. Thank you.
You're muted, Nick.
Thank you. If there's no other questions, I'll entertain a motion for approval of G3.
I'll make a motion.
Moved by Mr.
Second.
Pike. Moved by Pike, seconded by Mr. Solis. Vote, please.
Ramos?
Yes.
Hall?
I'm inclined to vote no because I don't understand why you have to contract so much for our CTE programs. Why do we have to outsource so much of it? But so I'm going to vote no at this time because it seems like $57,000 is a lot of money.
Solis?
Yes.
Segura?
Yes.
Pike?
Yes.
Tarantino?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. No, I'm sorry. Motion passes 4-1. 4 yes, 1 no.
Thank you. Let's move to L1.
Hold by Mrs. Hall.
Moved by Mrs. Hall, correct. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm asking about, this is a waiver. We have a lot of waivers. This is for a bilingual Spanish variable term waiver. They're teaching bilingual courses. My question is, we have, it seems like we've been approving waivers. I know I don't have a list. I'd like to see a list of how many waivers we have approved over the last year. How many teachers are still planning to, or how many we need to provide a waiver to going forward. How many do we anticipate having to apply for? And also, what's their plan? Are they ever going to get the necessary courses they need to get an actual certification to teach bilingual Spanish and the relative courses that they teach with a bilingual credential? I'd like to know that because I think our students that are taking bilingual courses deserve to have credentialed teachers teaching those courses. Because the fact that you speak Spanish and are fluent in it doesn't necessarily mean that you speak or are able to maintain the level of rigor that a bilingual credential would provide. So thank you.
So absolutely, I will be providing the list for you on the next Friday update. And just so you know, in this particular case, the waivers are for 2 individuals, and the granting of the waivers will allow them to serve in that assignment while they continue to complete the program and move towards obtaining the certification. So they are working on the program, they are working on their certification, and the requirement is for them to complete it. But I will provide the list for you in the next Friday update.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Reyes. Would you mind including in that what their plan, the plan is for each teacher, what their expected completion date is for their full certification? Because I think we need to understand that there is a plan and then kind of how it's being monitored. So I appreciate your help and being able to provide us that information in a Friday update. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. If we can go, when we have questions, if we can go through through Dr. Getty, then he could dictate who answers the question. I appreciate that. So we'll go. If there's no other questions, I'll entertain a motion for approval L1.
So moved. Solis.
I'll second it.
Second, move the second and vote, please.
Ramos?
Yes.
All?
Yes.
Solis?
Yes.
Pike?
Yes.
Segura?
Yes.
Tarantino?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
L2, pulled by me. So could you bring that up? So I could jog my mind here. Was there an attachment to it or not? Oh, so I think
Yes,
my question was just around how does this support diversity? How will this support diversity by having the universities, provide teaching, do what they do, or allowing them to do what they're going to do at our schools?
Yeah, so thank you, President Segura. This is an area where Dr. Reyes and I are going to be exploring if we could do outreach to different universities or different institutions to support bringing diverse student teachers onto our campuses in the future. So for example, I've asked Dr. Reyes to research if any historically Black colleges and universities or any Hispanic serving institutions offer these types of programs, if we can reach out to them. And so really it's an opportunity for us moving forward to see if this program can further support our efforts at having a diverse staff. So while this is something that's in front of us now, I think as we move forward, there's an opportunity there to be able to use this as a vehicle to support greater diversity in our teaching staff and other staff as identified as well, counseling or whatnot.
Thank you, Dr. Gary. That's great to hear. And with that, I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Second by Mr. Solis. Vote, please.
Ramos?
Yes.
All?
Yes.
Solis?
Yes.
Pike?
Yes.
Segura?
Yes.
Tarantino?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. M1 pulled by Trustee Hall.
Thank you, President Segura. I pulled this item to ask about the asbestos being used in one of these. What they're doing is looking at the portables and testing for asbestos and other hazardous materials. I'm curious because San Ysidro High is a fairly new campus compared to most of our other school sites on the west side of the district, and even Bonita High, which is on the eastern portion of our district. So were materials containing asbestos allowed to be used at San Ysidro High in its construction, or is And how do we make sure that when we rent or lease or whatever we do with portables, purchase them, they're not constructed with asbestos materials? How does that work? It seems to me that lead and asbestos have been hazardous materials for for more than a decade. I mean, I'm pretty sure about that. So why would we still need to be eradicating those materials at our schools? I'm done with that question.
Okay.
So,
Hi.
Janaea, do you want to go ahead and take that question? I think there's a little bit more to it than that, so we can provide the context.
There is, thank you. So we're not saying that there's asbestos. We're actually doing due diligence. Those are portables that were placed on a campus at about the time that it was constructed. We don't have the history on them. And so what we're paying Vista Environmental to do is to come in and do sampling in and around the buildings to confirm that we don't have any unnecessary surprises, absolutely, from a timing perspective and an age perspective. Those buildings generally are not going to have anything in them. Not knowing the history, they could have been painted with lead at some point or another. And so that's why we're having Vista come in. They're going to sample. They're going to give us a report that we are 100% anticipating is going to say that there's no hazmat material associated to those buildings, and then we will proceed with construction accordingly.
So let me ask you a follow-up question, if I could, Dr. Aguirre.
Yes.
All right. Do we have any kind of historical documentation on portables and classroom environments or buildings that we own or are on our school premises regarding whether or not there are hazardous materials? Don't we have any kind of historical data and information on that, when they were purchased, when they were used, when they were first located on our school site? Is there no documentation remaining at the school? I know this, one of the things that I've always hoped that we would be putting in our district is some real follow-up documentation, and so we know this stuff without having to go out and do a historical test, because it seems like a minor amount, but those things, if we go into every classroom and every building, it would certainly add up across the district. So I'd like to know that. Thank you.
Yeah, so there's multiple kind of layers to that question. The first one is, do we have historical data? The answer is, I believe for the most part, we do have historical data about when they were installed, for example. In this instance, there's a project to remove and replace those reloads, because when they were placed, the pad upon which it was placed wasn't really prepared adequately. So there's other issues that are going on there now in terms of the structural components to those reloads, because when they get moist, it intrudes directly into the reload. So there's the question about kind of from a bigger picture, when you're actually going to be removing reloads from a site or moving them, there are some things that we are required to have, and an inspector, such as this, is one of those when it comes to the reload project that we have at San Isidro. So we do have information, historical information. We, on an annual basis, perform AHIRA reports on our facilities. So there's multiple, and AHIRA has to do with asbestos and other environmental aspects. So we do have reports and we do have historical information, but when you're working on a project, there's some things that we are mandated to undertake. And so that's part of the process. Even if we have the historical information, we still have to have certain inspections that are undertaken. And Janaea, if I missed something or you'd like to add to that?
No, I mean, for me, it's a matter of also just kind of going back and making sure we're being really diligent in the work that we're doing, because if and when we were ever to get a surprise of a nature associated to this that we didn't do some diligence on, that cost could be exponentially more. So it's really about us validating. In some of these cases, we don't have some of the archived or the historical information because a lot of those portables have come from someplace else. at some point or another if they were placed on our campuses as interim housing. And those buildings over there specifically were placed with us as interim housing. So I don't know where they've been prior to that, and they're already 30 to 40 years old. So that's why we're taking the opportunity to be diligent. We do have a vast amount of information on other buildings, and we always do look at that as we proceed with projects. We also, for example, when we do a modernization to a traditional building, we also go through and do the hazmat assessments on those as well.
Thank you. I know that I received a letter when my oldest son was a student in the district from then Assistant Superintendent, I think his name was Bruce Husson, that sent out to parents that they were doing work on schools and there was some asbestos that they were not going to do any removal on because it would have, I guess, been too harmful to open up certain areas of different older buildings. But this being a portable and a newer school, I was concerned because it seems to me at some point we weren't supposed to be building with any kind of asbestos materials. I mean, is that true or not?
So the materials that is considered hazmat on our sites for the most part right now, if you were to go back and look at an original building, it's going to be like in the mastic on the windows. Most of those are going to have lead paint in them. Some of the plaster may be hot. So there's different elements of building structures that when they were originally constructed 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago may have asbestos containing or hazmat materials within them. But there is 100% health and safe way to remediate those buildings and to eliminate and remove those materials from our campuses. And so that is an objective that we would want to probably be moving towards as we continue to move forward in the future. And so, because then we have that safety of the fact that we know moving forward that it's been remediated. And so if you move and then you were to go in and say do a maintenance project or something behind that, then you know that there's no level of exposure or risk for a new penetration or anything else like that within our facilities.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Hall. With that, there's no further questions. I'll entertain a motion for M1.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Move seconded to approve M1. Call for the vote, please.
Ramos? Yes. Hall?
Yes.
Solis?
Yes.
Pike?
Yes.
Segura?
Yes.
Tarantino?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
And according to my chart, N1 is our last item.
Yes.
Pulled by Mrs. Hall, I believe. Yes. Or staff.
Yes, thank you. And my question is, this is for continuing a contract and moving it out an extra year. So the first option to renew. And the original board approval was in 2017, which is 3 years ago. So I'm wondering why we didn't go out for a new proposal on this contract through a bid process.
So if I may, President Segura?
Yes.
On this one, you're correct, Trustee Hall. It went out for RFP back in 2017. It's my understanding that it was for a 3-year contract with the possibility of 2 one-year extensions. And so this is the first of those extensions that is available to us. If you would like more detailed information, Dr. Sawkel is available. But generally speaking, these contracts are for 3 years. Approvals at the time of RFP, and it also allows for up to 2 years of additional term. But at the end of the day, we do go through an RFP process in order to secure these services.
Thank you. I do appreciate the fact that on the on the table that was included on the board item, there was a referral on the original board approval and the board item number. And I didn't have a chance to look up that board item to really review the full scope of the original contract. But considering all the things we've been through as a district fiscally since 2017, I was just concerned that we didn't go out and at least try to see if there was a new interest in a provider. So is there a particular reason we did not do that this year?
So I'll ask Dr. Sawkill to respond, but generally speaking, it's my understanding that when we did go out to RFP, there was a very limited amount of vendors that responded, just since this is a pretty specialized field. But I'll ask Dr. Sawkill to provide additional comment.
Yeah, I believe that's true. I think it is a very specified field, but I know that I appreciate that. So yes, if Dr. Sawkill would further elaborate, that would be great.
Thank you, Dr. Geary. And correct, we only had back in 2017 during that RFP process, there were only 2 firms that submitted proposals. And to Dr. Geary's point, it's a very specific niche area. And so we did proceed with requesting the 2-year option because the provider does provide support in special taxes, and developer fees, and a few other compliance requirements with the financial market. So felt at this point, extending that 2-year period still within the EDCO provisions, and given the limited response last time.
But correct me if I'm wrong, but this provider has been with our district as a contracted provider for more than just the 3 years preceding this year. Is that correct?
I believe so. I don't have the history, but that's my understanding. And then back in 2017, it was SDFA, the Special District Financing and Administration, this particular firm, and another firm that submitted a proposal.
And the other firm, was that within the like Southern California area?
I would have to search that trustee hall. I do not have that information.
Yeah.
Privy to that process.
So is this increasing any kind? I don't know what the previous, I don't know, maybe it says on here. The previous award was, how much was it per year?
It's continuing the same cost structure, does cover various fees from the different funding sources. So it is maintaining that status quo.
Well, it says 330,000 at the total on this table that's attached to the item. It says total 300,000, but the contract amount is 165. Is that because it's 165 for 2 years then?
Right, that's the only, what we have is 148,000 from our CFDs, and then there's a couple of other developer fee costs, and that's what we're indicating for the remainder of this term from January 2021 through December of 2022. So it's for that 2-year period.
Yeah, and you know what it says on here? It doesn't really break down the resources that are paying or the funds on this item, on the table that's attached, and on the summary or the analysis. It just says under fiscal impact, please refer to attachment. So I think that's not a really complete picture of what we need to have on our board items in order to really have full disclosure and transparency on an item, since all we have is this amendment to the agreement, not the original contract, and nothing that shows us what the resources are that are being charged on this.
Paul, under the table, there is a resource 40. So for each of the
but it doesn't tell you how much for each one, does it?
Not on this.
From various funds. So it doesn't break it down. So I think we need to know a little bit more on a little bit more clarity on the attachments to a board item, so we know we're doing our due diligence and have a full understanding of what we're approving.
So could we get that?
I can certainly provide a copy of the agreement from 2011, December 2011, 2017, and then along with the supporting details to break it out by particular funds and resources. It's the same resource, but different funds.
Dr. Getty?
So I was going to say, if it would be acceptable, we can provide that to the board as a Friday update with you have the full sum, but in terms of breakdown, we could provide that as a follow through on a Friday update.
So let me ask you this: in the contract, is there a quit clause? I don't know what you really call it, but where we could halt or stop the agreement and like at the end of next year if we wanted to, instead of having it for 2 full years, would we be able to halt the contract at the end of any period? Or are we obligated through that contract? See, I can't really tell because I don't have the original contract and the language around it.
Dr. Sokol, are you familiar with the particulars of that contract?
And I know that in working with general counsel, we typically have a 30-day kind of mutual or kind of a clause in terms of cancellation. I'm not sure regarding this particular one, but we definitely, I believe those would be incorporated, that language, into most of our agreements.
Having said that, I would caution us that this firm does a lot of work, including some disclosure work on our behalf. And so without having another firm providing services, I would just, I wanted to make a note of caution that this firm they do a good amount of work in different areas. And so before anything such as any action such as that, I just wanted to caution us.
Right, they do the postings. They're the district's dissemination agent through the financial market for all of our bonds, our continued disclosure requirements. So just even most recently, a few weeks ago, we posted the updates related to our audits.
So I was going to offer that if available, what we could look at is during the next cycle, rather than waiting the 2 full years, as we go through this process, issuing an RFP a year before we get to the full 5-year cycle. We're about to enter the 4-year cycle in January. We could prepare an RFP. Since preparing an RFP, issuing an RFP, getting those advertised and getting responses, it's all a timely process. Perhaps something that we could consider is issuing an RFP for that 5th and final year rather than the 4th year that's coming up. And unless Jenny, do you have any other thoughts or suggestions?
Well, that would work. I'm fine with that.
All right, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Do we have a second? Moved and seconded. Vote, please.
Ramos?
Yes.
Paul?
No.
Solis?
Yes.
Pike?
Yes.
Segura?
Yes.
Tarantino?
Yes.
Motion passes 4 yes, 1 no.
Okay, with that, thank you, board, staff, superintendent, and community. And with that, we are adjourned.